Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And welcome to another edition of Happy Hour. As always, if you are choosing to drink, whatever you're choosing to do, it's because I've been quoting the Emperor Palpatine a lot, which I'm going to talk about in here. Do it. Do responsibly. Do safely. Do healthily. Are you sipping on anything, Samantha?
I am. You know, I decided I'm going to throw it back to like when I was a kid, when I would mix fruit juices with like Sprite.
Yes.
I used to love doing that when I was younger. And so we bought some tangerine juice from Trader Joe's. And I like it, but it's a little too thick. So I have ginger ale. So I mixed it together. I'm like, this is a delight. Carbonated fruit drinks. Let's do this. So yes, I made myself a kid mocktail.
Well, that sounds lovely. I don't think it has to be a kid mocktail. It could just be like a nice drink you enjoy.
It's a kid mocktail. I'm okay with it. What about you?
I have my Galactic Gin.
Oh, yeah.
My sparkly blue gin that changes colors. Because today we're doing a very self-indulgent episode. We're getting towards the end of the year. And so I just wanted to talk about some Star Wars things that I've experienced lately. A gift for me, perhaps. No one else. But for me, a gift.
Yes.
Yes, because I talked about in the last wrap-up of the holiday special, the Star Wars holiday special, that the documentary was coming out about how it got made. And it did come out. And it was a whole thing about how I was going to watch it because it was surprisingly popular, perhaps, and it crashed the site, and then I couldn't get a hold of it, but I got it all worked out.
I still love my 12:30 a.m. text about it being released.
Yes, I was so excited. I didn't even watch it because I was like, I just wanted to check and see if it would work. And I had to let you know immediately.
And I'm glad you did.
It was very important news.
It was.
So I did watch it the next day with a friend of mine, and it's called A Disturbance in the Force. Here is the quote, the summary. In 1978, CBS aired the Star Wars holiday special the week before Thanksgiving to an audience of 13 million people. Considered one of the worst shows in television history, it only aired once. George Lucas tried to bury it, and an infamous camp legend was born. This documentary unravels the mysteries behind the most bizarre spin-off of all time. Although, they pointed out in there that there's actually what they called a worse one, which I have on my watch list to watch because I found it.
Oh, you did find it? You're like, I don't know if I'm like, you'll find it. And I found it.
I definitely found it. Okay. So, yes, there are a couple of things I wanted to talk about this that I know it sounds really silly, but I learned a lot. But one of the big things is that they really dove into the legend of it. And I hadn't considered this. But at the time, a lot of people there were no VCRs. So it comes out and there's no way to get it. If they never air it again, it's just like some strange fever dream you experienced.
Literally.
Yes. And so it became a joke of like, did you see it? And like, did you see it? And like, how can you get your hadn't thought about that of like there's no way to watch it again. And that becoming like kind of in some cases, gatekeepy. Like, have you seen it? Are you a real Star Wars fan? This was also like before Empire Strikes Back came out. And so there had just been this first movie and it was very, very popular. But because it was just this first movie, like no one was really sure what Star Wars was. And so all of this wild came out. Like, I'm saying some of the clips they were showing, oh my God. Or they were just trying all kinds of things. And a part of that was that at the time, there was a really big concern for George Lucas that people would forget about Star Wars before he made the next one. So it would just fade off. Like this huge popularity it had enjoyed would just go away. And for better or worse, and I know a lot of people would say for worse, Star Wars was one of the first like merchandising movies. Like people did it for TV shows, but they didn't really do it for movies at this time. So the holiday special was actually meant to sell toys to sort of like give them some time before the next one came out, where people didn't forget what it was. But also they were buying these toys, which they never released. And I'll go into that in a second. But a lot of kids did really like it. A lot of the people they interviewed saw it as kids and were like, oh yeah, I loved it. Star Wars, I was into it. Like,
it's just one of those that you had to have been there, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the things that are so strange now, it's still, I mean, we're strange then also, don't get me wrong. But like, I saw it as an adult. I probably would have at least liked some of it as a kid. And it would have been like, oh, they were, I feel like Weird Al Yankovic is in it. And I feel like one of the lines he had was like, we were just so desperate for anything Star Wars. I do, there were some random facts I learned. Cher was almost in it.
That makes sense to me.
I was shocked, but yes.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, it was the time of like, this was the variety show, which is what this is, was the popular thing at the time. Cher was supposed to be in the space porn part of it.
What? That didn't make sense to me. Okay. How dare you?
Well, the part that's where the old grandfather is watching what is pretty clearly pornography. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's why I say, how dare you?
Oh my gosh. It's also another thing I learned. So there's a big like legend about how Mark Hamill, how bad his accident was, his car accident, and about whether or not that's why they wrote in that scene in Empire Strikes Back at the beginning, which is not true, at least according to most things I've read. But some people thought he was wearing so much makeup, like comical amounts. I always laugh when I see him in this because of that scar. But apparently it was because essentially what happened is George Lucas was like, we're going to make this out of spite. Because he was so mad at the studios who were like, we're not going to help you promote and all of this stuff. So he's like, we're making this out of spite. But then he gets locked into a contract that he can't control and basically leaves, abandons it. And this is what happened. But that meant that the people who were running it were like, never heard of Star Wars, didn't know what it was. They were great at variety shows though. Like they that was their thing, but they had no idea what Star Wars was and what the fan base was about. And they hired a bunch of people who worked in Broadway. And so they were doing his makeup like you're on Broadway, which is like really heavy and stuff. But then they had all these lights and it just looks so bad.
Amazing.
Yeah, I got a lot of good fun facts out of this one. And I know you had asked Samantha if B. Arthur had ever spoken about this. And they had interviews from her in this. They didn't interview her. They were like interviews from a long time ago that they just had in it. And she was basically kind of like, I didn't get it, but I had fun with Art Carney. I liked the song because she asked for a specific type of song and they wrote it for her. She was kind of confused / bemused at how often she got asked about it and how often she got like letters about
That's amazing.
But she said they were generally nice. They were like, oh, I loved you in this. But it basically sounded like she kind of didn't really remember. Like it wasn't a big part of her life.
Like everybody else. I did what?
Yes, exactly. It was kind of a funny, she was like, I don't know, I had a good time with Art Carney. We sang some songs. It was space stuff that I didn't get, but
hey, people love it.
Yeah, people love. Well, and then also apparently in that scene, they had trouble because the costumes were so hot, so they had to film it really quickly, and people couldn't see. So that's why there's like that kind of goofy, like no one seems to be able to dance at all.
That makes more sense.
Yes, yes. And a part of the charm about it, for people who feel there's a charm about it, is that it feels bootlegged because you can't buy it. I actually looked recently and I found a link and I was like, oh my gosh, you can buy it. And it was like, no, you can't. So it was sort of a fake out. But because of that, the old commercials are in it. and the commercials from the 70s. And one of the news anchors in one of the commercials got famous enough from that. He's got kind of a cult following because he says something like, "Do you have a case of the frizzies?" So he's about hair. And he's so confused by the whole thing. He's like, I've done a lot in my life, but I get asked about the frizzies the most.
And he doesn't know?
They had an interview from him in there. That was really funny because I only have the one commercial. No, there's a couple commercials in mine. But the case of the frizzies is not in there in my bootlegged copy. The other part that was just interesting was hearing from people who saw it the first time and sort of the legacy of it, of that wild time before it was what it became, when no one knew what was going to happen. And it was all of this wild stuff. I mean, Disco Luke falls under there too. That's like, what was going on here? And yes, the people who made it generally did not know anything about Star Wars. They're much more in kind of the variety world / theater world. Mm-hmm. And they did call it a project made out of spite, which I feel like shows. But it's because George Lucas was basically like, oh, watch this. So I'm going to find a way to promote it myself if you won't help me. And then he left. And then and then he hated it and actually asked if it was possible to not air it. But they'd spent too much money on it. And they were like, you signed that you're in this contract. So that was a good clarification because I've always heard that he had nothing to do with it. He did have something to do with the beginning, and then he wasn't involved at all. And that was one of the most, of a documentary about a Star Wars holiday special, one of the most poignant moments was that they asked somebody who had worked on it, and they're like, what do you think about him taking his name off of it? And he was basically like, I've never taken my name off of anything I did, whether it was bad or good. It must be nice. It's like, oh.
He's like, good on you.
But some of I remember I've talked about this, and some of the creators were like, legitimately have fond memories of making it. They still clearly remember it really well. They were talking about all the decisions they made that now seem kind of silly. They had an interview with Jefferson Airplane in there. They were like, we didn't know that the effects were going to be that bad.
That's funny.
It was good. I enjoyed it. But it was an example of something that, because Seth Green was also big in this, and he was like, how could you let
Seth Green was the one that was,
he was a big part of no, not in the documentary.
Like, why was he a part of the documentary?
He's a huge Star Wars fan. He does all the Robot Chicken stuff. He does a bunch of,
because he just likes it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he also knows George Lucas, and he was talking about that. He was like, I asked him straight up, how did you let this happen if you hated it so much? Like, how could this happen? It just, the studios and all that stuff. And I've said before, I feel like The Empire Strikes Back it's an interesting case because I believe we have The Empire Strikes Back because of the holiday special. And now that I've watched the documentary, I think the reason is twofold. One is the reason he left the variety show George Lucas did was because he went to go work on The Empire Strikes Back. But also the reason he was like, I'm not taking any studio money is because of the holiday special. Because he's like, I'm doing this on my own.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. I really liked it. It's really funny. It's very, very funny. And just to see the other stuff in there, because they did talk about the one they say is worse has Donny Osmond in it. And they had him in it talking about that. He was like, I don't know. We just thought it was going to be fun. We didn't know how it was going to be received.
Was Donny Osmond supposed to replace
he was
Mark Hamill?
Skywalker? Yeah.
Okay.
I think his sister was Leia, which is interesting.
Marie? I mean,
I think so.
Hopefully they didn't have to kiss.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen it yet, but it's in my watch list.
I do not want to be a part of this, Anney.
It's only 7 minutes long, I'll tell you that. But if they're saying 7 minutes long, it is worse than holiday special. I think that's pretty bad. I don't know. I'll report back. I have to brace myself for it. Which, speaking of, I also have a final note. I did go to a Star Wars themed parody burlesque show this weekend. It had a holiday Star Wars bar attached to it, which was why I was originally there. But then people were like, you should go see this. It's called The Empire Strips Back. And I was like, I don't know if that's going to be my thing. But people kept telling, people I trust were like, no, it's going to be your thing. It was very fun. I laughed a lot. It is very, very funny. I had a good time. The drinks have funny descriptions. Like there's like Kylo Rye. And one of the ingredients is absent parents.
Damn.
Yeah. I got the Leia one because solidarity. But there was a song between Han and Leia to Smooth Criminal. So that was interesting experience, hearing them sing Anney, Are You Okay? While I'm there. There was a song with Emperor Palpatine called Wrecking Ball, where I won't soon forget it. There was a sexy Luke. There were, I think, 2 sexy Luke dances. There was a whole thing about Leia versus Padme, which everyone said Padme was sexier. And I was like, huh, interesting. But I did like they had the scene on Tatooine and the bikini, but they still had Leia killing Jabba in there. And I was like, thank you. I feel like you have to have that. If you're going to show that, you have to have that.
Yeah.
But no, I had a good time. I had a fun. It was a fun Star Wars end of the year things I've been enjoying.
Love it.
Yeah. So yes, this was very self-indulgent. I appreciate you all letting me share it. Because yeah, I just had a good old time. I watched that documentary several times already.
Did you really?
Yeah, it's really funny. There's one of the guys behind making it was like, there's something about a train wreck like this that is so fascinating. That's how did it happen? Yeah.
I mean, that's the question.
Well, that is the question. And I did learn quite a bit. But yes, cheers.
Cheers.
To you. Cheers to you, listeners. Oh, and none of this was sponsored, by the way, by anything I talked about. They probably never heard of me.
If they ever say, hey, would you like to be sponsored by the Star Wars variety show holiday special? Oh my God.
I'll be like, in what way? How would that work?
How does this work?
They did have a whole conversation about, will one day it be embraced? Because you still cannot get it. You can get pieces of it on Disney Plus, but you cannot get it.
Isn't it technically embraced? It's just that it's not embraced by the makers.
It's not, yes. Because like I said, it has gone mainstream in terms of like you can get official merchandise and you can go to Disney and they have a day. But like you cannot stream it anywhere. You cannot buy it anywhere. You can see pieces of it. So will one day that happen? I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
But in the meantime, well, if you have any thoughts about any of this, some of you have written in about Empire Strikes Back. So
okay.
Thanks. Yes, I think I got some suggestions from listeners about it. You can write to us about any of those things. I always love hearing about that. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on TikTok and Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You. We have a TeePublic store. There is a Disco Anney shirt in there.
Yes.
That falls under what we were just talking about, I would say.
It does.
It's also a book that we have. You can get wherever you get your books, where I do talk about a lot of this Star Wars stuff as well. Yes. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.